Hey guys, and welcome to Digital Artcast hosted by Gordon Neill. This episode is proudly sponsored by Procreate, the most advanced painting app ever designed for a mobile device. We'll be discussing the app a little more in the episode, as well as giving away a free copy. We're also brought to you by Firestarter Community Magazine, your connection to the creative network. Now, let's start the episode.
Okay guys, and welcome back to Digital Artcast. We are here in the next episode with another interview. This time, someone, again, it was mixing up from the concept side of it. We're going towards matte painting this time, and we have managed to wrangle Mr. Maxx Burman. Thank you very much, Max, for giving up your time to speak to us, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's an absolute honour. We're very delighted that you could take the time out of your busy schedule to talk to us. So Max, like probably most of the guests, I'm a fan of your work and know kind of in depth about things and projects you've undertook. But for people who don't know you, what's your job? What's your day-to-day, role? What do you do for a living?
Sure. Well, my main specialty is matte painting. So kind of creating the environments for films and games. And I do a lot of concept art and art directing as well. Just pretty much creating environments is really my thing.
Grand. And then again, your career's been illustrious so far, but how did you find your way into painting? Because especially, I think even matte painting is something that has only really come about. Well, I mean, it's been in movies for years and years, but a lot of concepting's gained its popularity in the last 5 or 6 years. So. How did you know when you were younger, or whenever you got into art? How did you know that's what you wanted to do, and how did you get into the industry to start with?
Sure. Well, I got pretty lucky with matte painting. I had been using Photoshop for a while, and I always liked doing the photoreal stuff. And I was showing my portfolio to a couple people, and someone said, "Oh, you're a matte painter." And I was like, "Yes, I am." And that's kind of how I found out about matte painting.
Nice.
And then in terms of how I got in the industry, I knew I wanted to work in visual effects, so I went through the phone book at that time and called every studio in LA offering to work for free.
Oh, wow.
It was just like, I need to be in a studio. I just need to see what that world is like and be in that world. And after calling all 200 studios in LA,
Wow.
Zoic got back to me, so Z, the bottom of the list, and offered me an internship.
Wow.
And that's where I started. And shortly after I was working there, or started there, Sid Dutton, who's just this legendary matte painter, joined the studio.
Yep.
And took me under his wing as his apprentice.
Wow.
So it was very, very fortunate and very lucky, but that's kind of how I got my first job.
Wow. And I was just going to say, Max, would that mean that you didn't do the kind of traditional route that most people do, where it's an education platform? You would have went to something like Cal Arts or Art Centre. You just did you teach yourself along the way?
Yeah, I was teaching myself, and I was taking classes at Noman. I wasn't full-time enrolled. I was just kind of taking classes on the side. But I started at Zoic when I was 18, so I was fresh out of high school and just taking night classes, and that opportunity happened to come about.
Wow, and again the way of the old style painters, where you would be an apprentice to someone, you would learn from the master. It's something that's quite rare as well, because most people, even though they can kind of dodge school, will learn online through some third-party software or third-party teaching, like Learn Squared or like Nomon, and to be taken on by somebody who's already, a legend in their field must have been, I don't know, scary, nervous, startling. It must have been all those things at once, I suppose. Was that something that you never really envisioned happening, or was it something that just came by luck, or?
Yeah, finding a mentor is an incredibly difficult thing, and very few people ever get that chance. I've been very lucky in my career to have several mentors who've taken me on.
Wow.
Uh,
Yeah.
but when that happened, it was it was one of the best days of my life because I knew when he took me on that I actually was going to have a career in this industry, and that I was given that opportunity to learn from him.
Wow.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember that day vividly. I was teary eyed because I knew that I actually had a future career, and that was the day that I knew that.
Yeah.
And Sid treated me amazingly. He taught me so much,
Yeah.
And he had a sixth sense of humor too. So yeah, I was like absolutely terrified, and always wanting to get his approval. And he would walk past. He'd come up behind me and see my painting and just go, "Huh, he's lost the magic," and just turn and walk away.
Oh dear, Crow. But I suppose that's a double-edged sword, because although it might demotivate, that stuff can also sometimes inspire. So if he's wanting to push the best out of you, he's maybe not wanting to give you your graces straight away. He's wanting you to push to do better. I suppose.
Yeah, and it took me a little bit to realize that was just his sixth sense of humor.
Yeah.
Just his way of joking with me. But at first, I was like crushed, and after a while, it would just make me laugh.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. So you worked at the studio earlier on. You're 18. You've got this apprenticeship. You're working towards this thing. Were you involved in a major kind of Hollywood production straight away? Did you work in a kind of film or movie? Being in that, I'm assuming it was a film studio you worked in to start with.
Yeah, Zoic mostly does television and commercials, and we had a couple films. But yeah, right away I was doing a couple shows. I was doing this show called V and another one called Flash Forward, and
Yes.
Yeah, and got chances to do some paintings for True Blood and Fringe and
Wow.
a bunch of those kinds of TV shows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was that something that you had envisioned? Like, were you happy doing what you're doing at the time? Were was that what you envisioned doing, or was there I don't know, a need to do something bigger and greater, or were you quite content with working on those TV shows at the time, or?
I was excited to be working on shows to be able to like turn on the TV and see my paintings. That was exciting. Part of me didn't care about the project and always just really cared about the paintings.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part of me always had this hunger to work on the biggest movies and the biggest projects and the biggest studios.
Yeah.
So it was kind of both. I was really happy to be there, but I also had this ambition to do a lot more than that.
Yeah. And then again, that was a kind of, I would say, humble start, but it was quite an illustrious start for most people to be working so quickly. But how long were you there before you moved on to another studio? And then what was your next step? Where did you go after there?
Yeah, I was there for a year and a half, and then I broke away. And actually, it was a big learning curve for me when I left, because I thought I was ready to go freelance, and I think a lot of people want to jump into freelance, and I honestly wasn't ready for it. So I broke away when I probably should have stayed there a lot longer, and I would have loved to have stayed there with Sid a lot longer. And I hit like a horrible dry spell. I was like, oh, I have a portfolio now. I've been doing these projects. I can get some freelance work.
Yeah.
And I got a couple freelance jobs, and then I hit a dry spell that really shook me. And then after a couple months, I got a staff job at Stargate, another TV studio. And so I was doing Walking Dead over there and a bunch of other shows.
Wow.
And met a second mentor, Cedric Tomacruz, who's just like, he really, really honed my technical skills. So I spent a year with him there, and we just had a blast, and I learned a lot from him. And by the time I was done with this kind of like boot camp with him, I actually went back to Zoic as a lead map painter.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like quite a specialised path you've kind of carved out for yourself, because obviously most people we speak to in this podcast, they will probably have, like a humble beginning from going to, they'll start in school, and then they'll maybe get into a smaller studio doing, a show that nobody's heard of, or working in a game that's like mobile, or, something very low budget compared to, where they eventually end up. But you've been kind of thrown in at the deep end from a very young age. I mean, because obviously, straight from Zoic, you were walking into stuff like The Walking Dead, where, that's like a major AAA studio TV show that's, seasons wide. Even just a side note from your career, but how did you handle that pressure of having to work on such a big scope, I suppose?
Yeah, I think that's something that I'm always up for the challenge of it. I always love that challenge. And so if there wasn't a challenge or if there wasn't things at stake, I would need to move on to something else.
Right. Yeah. So you tend to not to try get too comfortable. You want to try and be pushing outside your comfort zone a lot of the times.
Yeah, I try to never get comfortable. Even now, coming up on 10 years doing this stuff. If it's something comfortable, then I'm not really interested in it.
Right.
Oh, go for it.
No, I was just gonna say, so you're always looking for that next thing that you think will be something that will test you, that'll push you that further bit out than it did before.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the beautiful things is, like, early in my career working on television was you'd have such a quick deadline to do paintings. You really only have a day or two to do a matte painting. So after doing 3 years of that, it was just, I've experienced so many different kinds of paintings, and I've gotten so fast because I had to get my techniques down, that I feel like it was just I learned really, really fast because there was no other choice.
Yeah, so it was kind of trial by fire, if you may, kind of thing.
Yeah, and when I had gone back to Zoic as a lead, I had gotten pretty comfortable with those quick turnarounds, and at that point, it was very much I was looking for the next challenge, which was, what do you do if you have 2 weeks to do a painting and you want to make it look perfect? How do you push it where the deadline isn't the constraint, but the quality is? And so after that, it was time for me to leave television.
Right, and then of course now it starts your career in and I mean, I'm assuming it was movies next, but obviously you've worked in video games, you've worked in mobile stuff, you've worked in TV advertising. I mean, was that your next aspiration after working in TV for so long? Did you want to go to feature films, or was there something else that called you after that?
Yeah, I was actually really interested in animation because it was so different. So I left Zoic and went to Sony Animation and did Hotel Transylvania. And then after that, ended up working with Blur and Digital Domain and MPC and all of those, and focusing more on game cinematics, commercials, and film. Wow.
Yeah. And then again, was that again where you wanted to be, or were you just kind of constantly looking for the next challenge, or was there something that was it all freelance kind of stuff, or were you jumping from studio to studio on each project?
It kind of went both ways. There were times, like, I was at Sony for maybe 8 months. I was at Digital Domain for almost a year. So it was freelance, but I would spend some time at these places. Yeah. But also, like, I never had one job. I always had multiple jobs going. So I'd be at a studio for 8 hours a day, and then I'd go home and have another 6 hours of different freelance jobs. Like, I always double booked myself for the first couple of years at least.
Yeah. I mean, and is that something that you kind of still emulate today? Do you still try to work those 12-hour, 16-hour days, or is that have you drawn back a bit now, and have you got more balance, kind of work life going on?
Yeah, I did that early in my career because I had somewhere I wanted to get to and somewhere I wanted to be. I'm pretty comfortable with where I'm at in my career right now, so now the challenge is very much fighting for as much balance in my life outside of work as possible.
Yeah, which I think is something that I've spoke to multiple people, and it's something that everybody strives for, because this industry in particular, and I think more towards America, is very intensely focused on work ethic. So even like a studio I've been interning in recently, their days consist usually from 10 in the morning till 6 at night, and then they go home for the day. They don't work the weekends. Unless obviously there's a push on at the end, but then obviously after 6 o'clock, I think it's like time and a half. After 10 o'clock, it's double time. Whereas in America, I think they have a situation where they're quite eager to work those 10, 14-hour days if they can in most studios. And even stuff like, we get 30 days vacation across here. In the States it's more like 10. So do you think there's a culture shift in America? Do you think you guys are more focused on the deadline? You guys are more willing to push those kind of 12-hour days, in studios as opposed to anywhere else that you've worked? Or
Yeah, definitely. I think the U.S. very much has that culture of living to work versus I think a lot of other places in the world work to live.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's fine. It's nice because you have a certain amount of camaraderie and you have that burning energy and that passion, and that's amazing. It feels great.
Yeah.
But it also leads to burnout and not good work. And so
Yeah.
I think there's a middle ground that we need to hit.
Yeah, because I think there's a huge shake-up. We talked about this in the last episode with Matt Gazer, who obviously has worked in some major studios, ILM, Skywalker Ranch, and DreamWorks. But we also talked to him about how there's a whole shake-up just now in the industry where a lot of guys are trying to work towards a unionization of a lot of the guys that work in the industry. Probably because there's so many conditions under which people work where it's not great. I'm trying to think of an example, but the only one I can think of is the recent Sausage Party film that was produced out of a small studio in LA, Seth Rogen's film, and a lot of the guys that were doing the VFX for that, I think there was kind of horror stories coming out of the press about how, the guys were getting worked, 14, 16 hours, 6 days a week. They were getting no vacation time. They were getting, guys were leaving, I think, 2 months before the project shipped, and their names were getting taken off the credits, and there was a whole slew of stuff. It's a fully loaded question, but even if you could kind of skim over it, what are your thoughts on bringing unions into kind of all aspects of concept art or production? I know there is a system in place for movies just now where people work within a union for the movie industry, but obviously I think people try to expand that into games and animation. How do you feel? Do you think that would help the industry as a whole?
Yeah, I'm very mixed on it. It's a complicated issue. I think without unions, the quality of your work is really the guiding factor to whether or not you're working. And with unions, a lot of the times it becomes the people who are grandfathered in, or the people who have been working in the business longest are the ones who are going to get the jobs or have the higher rates.
Yeah.
So I'm very much of the mindset of it should all be based on the quality of your work and the experience that you give your client, regardless of if you can get into a union or not.
Okay.
And also, our industry is very different than a lot of other industries in that it's global. So if the games industry were to have a union, and I don't know what's going on with their current unions, but I just know that like Art Directors Guild and stuff like that, that's very much an LA-based union. And if everything went that way, it would be really hard to use amazing artists who might be in a place of the world where they don't have the connections to get into there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Which is fine, obviously, because, like I said, it's a double-edged sword because me and Matt talked about this the last episode where it's great where the union brings in security for people with with families or with health issues and stuff like that, where you're getting treated fairly within the studio. But then Matt talked about he had seen not naming any names, but he'd seen some major motion pictures coming out, releasing some concept art, and he had said that it seemed like not the best work he had seen. It seemed even a bit kind of thrown together or a bit lazier than some of the stuff he'd seen where people were non-unionized or not working within a union structure. And has that been your experience with some film studios, or can you talk about that at all? Do you feel like the unions maybe make people a bit more complacent within their work?
I haven't worked directly with any unions or any union jobs because visual effects doesn't have a union. So if you're a concept artist for a production, you might have to be union, but if you're a concept artist for the VFX studio working on it, you don't.
Right.
So, I've been very much on the VFX studio side of things, so I haven't seen that. Everything is very much based on the quality of your artwork, and that's how I believe it should be. I've never been much for being part of the pack. That's one of the reasons I'm not a staff artist anywhere. I much prefer that, to do my own thing and not necessarily follow the horde.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah. And is that something that you probably feel is a more balanced for you? Do you feel like you're less want to be in a studio environment. You're happier outside when you're freelancing, when you're working with clients remotely.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of time working at like 30 different studios. I owned a VFX studio for a while.
Right.
Uh, I was a staff art director at a studio. So like I feel like I've had all those positions possible. And at a certain point, I realized that what was important to me is the lifestyle I wanted to create, and to let the work kind of go around that lifestyle. If it didn't support my lifestyle, then to not take it on. And one of the things I hate more than anything else is when I'm trying to do a creative job and someone else is telling me where to be and when to be there. And especially when it's some HR person who has no clue what the creative process is like. So I'd rather sidestep all that and just say, hey, look, I work on my own terms, but I do really good work and I treat people really well and I always keep my word. So if you want to work with me, I'll always make sure you have what you need, but I got to live my lifestyle the way I want it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it horns back to a talk I listened to a while back with Bobby Chu, the guy from Schoolism, where he talked about one of his first jobs he received when he was up in Canada was to go and work, I think it was at the time Alice in Wonderland. And, I think at the time Tim Burton had said that he wanted him to go over to Los Angeles, and he was like, well, I'm in Canada and I don't want to travel. And he was like, all right, well, we really love you on set. And he says, no, I could do this stuff from remote. I don't have to be there. And, they kind of back and forward for a while until eventually he was like, well, it's fine, you can work from Canada. So, I think it's more, especially since the boom of the internet, people are kind of finding their way that they don't need to be in a studio environment. I think it's more, like you said, for concept and matte, it's you can have that luxury. I think 3D guys still have more of a place in the studio, but with the 2D concept and stuff in matte painting, I think there's more free reign for people to work remotely. And obviously it also affords you the things like working internationally as well. Like, you talked about guys working across the other side of the world. Have you also worked outside of the US? I take it. I'm assuming you have.
Yeah. I've been I lived in Vancouver for a little bit and did a couple films up there. Actually, that was like one of the big turning points, to have to go up there and leave my friends and family behind to do those projects. After that, I realized it's just not worth it, and I won't do that anymore. But I do work for studios all over the world. And working with someone in a studio in London or in New York is no different than working for a studio in LA for me. And I think that's the beauty. But also, back to your point about 3D artists not necessarily having that luxury, I have to say that I really think that anyone who has incredible work, who really does an incredible job and can manage themselves well, regardless of their skill set or what their craft is, can set this up for themselves. I think I had to take a stand, and when a lot of people told me that they wouldn't hire me remotely, and say, well, that's the only way I'm doing it, and I'm going to do such good work that you're going to want to be okay with it. And I think if you're a modeler, a texturer, a rigger, whatever, if you do the best possible work and people really want to work with you, then you can take that stand.
And again, it's like I said, it's more. I think people are freelancing more and more. I mean, I know the studio we were at, we do have guys who they would go to, especially for stuff like matte painting and 3D. If there's specifically specialized people in the field, they would hire outside to bring that talent in, because obviously it's harder to get those guys. I think, especially, I mean, if you're looking at guys who are like the best in the industry, they probably will want to work with multiple studios across multiple contracts from different locations, and I doubt they would be tied down to one studio, because obviously talent like that is very sought after. So I think it's very rare when you have people at the top of their game. I think they're the people that would more want to work remote, like yourself, obviously, because now obviously you have a huge portfolio, a huge legacy behind you. So, your emails must be, people constantly looking for work and trying to hire you across the world. So, how do you find that balance about where you want to take projects? Is it just the project itself that attracts you to the work, or how do you find where you want to go next?
Well, for me, the projects I do now, I do with the understanding that it's not my project. I'm a hired gun, and my goal is to give the client exactly what they want as quickly as possible and the best quality.
Yeah.
So what the project is doesn't really matter to me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've done like one of every kind of painting at this point,
Yeah.
not a lot new that comes up.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I choose projects based on how much freedom they're going to give me to do my own work.
Right.
So I don't work all year round. I'm selective with the time frames.
Right.
So I'll take a project for a month or two, and then I'll take a couple months off. And really, it's the people behind the project is really the thing that determines whether or not I'll take it.
Right. Yeah. And is that talking about your kind of lifestyle or things that would adapt to that, is this because you just like time with family and friends, or do you travel a lot, or is it to compensate for that, or?
Yeah, I travel a lot. I spend a lot of time with my family and friends, and I also do a lot of my own artwork, and I have a lot of other things that outside of matte painting that I love to do, like teaching classes for Learn Squared, or doing my own, like I'm doing an art show now, making a video game right now, like all of these different things, and I want to make sure I give them just as much time as I give my client work.
Right. Okay. And so the client work's more to afford time to work on your kind of own IPs, your own visions, which I think is a common tale for a lot of people I've spoke to who are at the kind of top of the game, where they want to use the work they do outside to fuel their own vision they have for a game or a movie. I mean, Dan Luvisi obviously is one of the standing trials for a lot of the guys in the industry, where he's pushed LMS for years now. That's been trying to get a major studio behind it. Is that the kind of thing you want to be doing? Is when you talk about you're building a video game, are you looking to build a studio around that produces content, or is it just something solely just from yourself, kind of solo project?
Yeah, well, I have a game that's coming out later this year with Nintendo. So I've kind of spent a while making that, and what Dan's been doing with LMS is absolutely incredible. I have the endurance for that. Rather than doing that, I'd rather just make stuff on my own and release it, and not have to try to do something so big that I have to have a lot of financial support to make it happen.
Yeah.
Instead, I'd rather take client work to fund my projects and then to just make them happen. But I'm not trying to do something nearly as ambitious or big as Dan's been attempting.
Yeah. I mean, like, if people don't know about Dan Luvisi's work, I'll link it below because I need to, because I still come across people in this industry who've never heard of him, and I'm like, I can't understand how. Like, the guy's like a legend in his own lifetime, and LMS obviously is such a broad thing that he's tried to push, and that Bounty Hunter movie, man, like I just cannot wait for that to hit the screens. It's something that I would give up time and energy to see. And I'm still wishing the guy the best of luck. I'm actually I know you can. Yeah, his stuff's incredible.
100% with that. Like I want to watch that guy succeed so badly. I love what he's standing for and what he's doing. And Dan, if you're listening to this, any help that I can give you, just let me know.
Yeah. Well, actually, there's a couple of guys. I've never spoke to Dan directly or kind of interacted with him. I mean, but there is people, around about his social circle that I talk to now and again. Obviously, like guys like Justin Field and stuff, and Mark Burnett, and a couple of other guys in that side of LA. But his stuff has been doing well. MS for the last couple of years has been groundbreaking. So yeah, all the luck in the world to you, buddy. So I mean, you're taking on the kind of freelance stuff. You're building your rep now. I suppose the kind of thing is, where do you see yourself in the next couple of years? Do you feel like matte painting is something you just continue to do going forward, or are you trying to diversify your skills into something else? Or
yeah, it's an interesting question, because like right now I've worked really hard to have the freedom that I have right now, and I'm really enjoying this time.
Yeah.
And really trying to just enjoy the moment right now with having the freedom to pursue these things that I've been wanting to make. I love matte painting, and I'll probably continue to do it for a while. But the course that I've been on is just limiting how much work I do for other people more and more. And just being very selective and continuing to work with the people I absolutely love working with. Like I love working with Blur. Anytime they need anything, I'll be there for them. But really, the next couple of years, I'd like to kind of step away from doing that much client work and really be focusing just 100% on my own stuff.
And is that is the game project what is encompassing you just now? Is that something you're trying to move into as video games, or is there multiple levels of things you're trying to accomplish?
I love video games. I love making them. And the tools now are such that I can do that.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one of the big things that I'm going to keep doing is making games and doing art shows. I'm working on my first art show now, and I've had a lot of fun with that. And then a lot of education stuff. I've had a blast just teaching and seeing people take that information and move forward with it. I make a deal with all of my students when we do the apprenticeship program. And the deal is that I'm going to teach them or show them or answer any questions. I'm going to give them everything I have, but in exchange, I get to take credit for everything they do in the future.
Sounds like a fair deal. I mean, I can't see a problem with that at all. Yeah, I mean, we could definitely take some time just now because I know this has been quite a big part of your life the last year or two. So you're working with McChaney's team. You've worked with Learn Squared. You've just not just, but I think it was last year it came out the intro to map painting course. Do you want to talk about that kind of more in depth, what that offers, and where the guys can find it?
Sure. Here's my plug. Go to learnsquared.com, and all of their courses are awesome. And Ash and Mache and all those guys, they are just some of the best artists I've had the pleasure of knowing.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I did an intro to map painting course for them in December, and I'm working on another one now. So I'll continue to be a part of the Learn Squared community. They built something really special, and I really believe in what they're doing. So I'm gonna keep trying to contribute as much as possible to them.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, with intro to map painting, this is just a kind of start to finish. You could do the course and be able to produce. I think there's you would build 2 or 3 portfolio pieces. Is that right? And then you kind of walk them through the steps from initial kind of basic concept and drafting to the end result at the end.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of hypotheticals there. I tried to break it down almost like an IKEA instruction manual. Right. It's really step 1, step 2, step 3. And the way that my process works is when you have to produce map paintings and you have to produce a lot of them very quickly, you can't just kind of wing it. You really have to have a structure and a process in place. So I very much have it like an assembly line. So I walked through all of that, and it's been cool because a couple of the people who were in my apprenticeship program, I think almost half of the people who did the mentorship are working as map painters now. So they've been posting their client work and professional jobs, and it's awesome to see. So that's been like one of the most fulfilling things I've done in a long time.
Yeah, and that kind of teaching bug. I mean, would you ever see yourself classroom based? Are you quite content doing the remote stuff that's then posted through the third-party websites like Learn Squared?
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever be like a resident teacher anywhere, because then I'd be limited to 10 or 20 students, whereas with Learn Squared I can kind of teach hundreds of people at a time. But one of the things that I do love doing, I just did it for the first time last month, is I was speaking at IFCC.
Oh yeah, of course, in Croatia,
yeah, it was my first keynote, and it was so incredible. So I don't think I'd be a teacher anywhere, but I'll definitely continue to give talks.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things I've found with going to a lot of these events, I mean, I never managed to get to IFCC, unfortunately, because I'm still in the process of finishing my degree, so money is tight. But IFCC, Trojan Horse, THU, I mean, stuff like this, and obviously industry workshops as well in London. These kind of things, especially because I went to, my first kind of proper one of going to these experiences was last year at industry workshops in London, and Daniel and his team put together an amazing week of learning, and yeah, it just I don't know how you explain it, but it just energizes you and pushes you back out into the world, and you just want to do bigger and better things because you see there's so much creative energy around those events and so many amazing speakers and demos. Yeah, I mean, I just couldn't recommend it enough to anybody who has the opportunity to go to these events and meet these people. I mean, I know one of the guys I started the podcast with, Colin, he's based up in Toronto, and he had one called Edge Control, I think was up there, where a couple of guys like Ash and that went up. John Polidori, they done talks up there. But these things are awesome. So yeah, was your IFCC experience great? Did you love it?
It was absolutely incredible. Yeah, Marco and Sven over there, they really have created something special. And yeah, I went there to just talk, and I kind of was a little closed-minded. I was like, I'm going to go here, I'm going to give my talk, I'm going to do portfolio reviews, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then I just being around all these incredible artists and watching their workflows, it changed. I left with so many ideas of like, oh man, I want to try approaching paintings this way, or this mindset, or this process.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, artists that I have endless respect for, and for years and years, who I just hit it off with and became just deep friends with. You have these, you share this experience, and it's philosophical as much as it is artistic, and you make these relationships that are kind of just, even though you spend 1 week with the person, you feel like you've known them for a lifetime. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I'll just take just 5 minutes just now, just because I really want to talk about industry workshops in London. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Max, but Daniel that I'd set it up like last year, so it's running again this year. So industry workshops in London. It's a 3-day event. There's going to be a kind of full range of speakers. If anybody wants to check out the event, you can go to industryworkshops.co.uk and check out the ticket sales. They've just went live. I think they start from, or they are £320. But that includes your event pass. I think you get a bag kind of full of loot. It involves breakfast every morning, and there's coffee and tea. And then obviously all the talkers they have throughout the days. Some highlights for me this year are going to be Paul Scott Canavan, Mark Molnar, Sean Silvestri. So I mean, they have a range of people that come across and do these talks. I mean, I know even last year a highlight for me was seeing the guys from CD Projekt Red who worked on the Witcher games. They were great to meet, and obviously they do portfolio reviews. I mean, last year when I went to the event in London, I met the guys from Axis Animation in Glasgow, so that was how I got involved interning for them, because I made a connection at the event. But they had guys from Framestore, NPC, Creative Assembly, the guys who do Warhammer stuff. So there was a whole host of stuff. But guys, if you want to go check out industryworkshops.co.uk, go and look at the ticket sales and get your ass down there, because it is a great 3 days. And like IFCC and stuff like that as well, it's just packed full of creatives. Even apart from the speakers, there's so many people there that are just there to learn and be part of that community. And yeah, I can't think of any reason why you wouldn't want to go to these things, because they just invigorate you. I mean,
yeah, definitely. And the industry workshops looks great. I definitely want to check that out in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, Daniel's just him and his team put on an amazing 3 days there, and the guys that managed to pull a lot of the guys obviously think when it's going to be based in London it'll be mostly European artists, but they've managed to pull some guys across from the States a good couple of times. I think Thomas Scholes was one of the talkers last year. He was from the States last year, and obviously there was Aaron Beck, who's obviously a great guy in the industry as well, across from New Zealand. So yeah, it's always good to go into these events, because you learn so much. Even Nick from Nick Grider from Naughty Dog was there. So yeah, it was a great time last year. A lot of good talks. So yeah, but then again, speaking of kind of industry workshops, one of their major sponsors is the same as ours, which is Procreate. So just at this point of the podcast, we're going to break off. We're going to talk about our sponsor, which is Digital Artcast, which is Procreate. If you guys didn't know, Procreate's an Apple Design Award-winning digital painting and illustration solution designed exclusively for iOS. Procreate allows you to create professional-grade artworks wherever you are, with an advanced dual texture brush engine, a robust layering system, and a groundbreaking canvas resolution, all for $5.99, and that's in UK pounds. If you want to find out more, you can head across to procreate.art to look at the app. And in this particular ad read, we could talk about the features, but Max does use the program, or has used it in the past for concepting. So what's been your experience with Procreate, Max? I'm assuming a positive one, or?
Yeah, definitely. Procreate it's cool. Whenever I'm sketching on an iPad, that's what I'm using. It has a lot of the tools where I'm pissed that Photoshop doesn't have those tools. Perspective tools especially, they're awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super nice.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. It's kind of like if you're going to be painting on an iPad, you should use that. Personally, I use the iPad more for just like thumbnailing and sketching, but it's cool. If I had the patience, I could probably do a whole painting on Procreate. I just usually don't have the patience and need my keyboard shortcuts.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great app.
Yeah. Well, funny you say that, Max. Funny you say that because just recently Procreate integrated keyboard shortcuts into the app. So if you were to bring across a Bluetooth keyboard or any of the smart keyboards that attach to the iPads, you can use the keyboards to use hotkeys. So your copy and paste, cuts, all that kind of stuff, resizing, is now built into the app. So yeah, maybe you want to look at what further down the line if you wanted to grab a Bluetooth keyboard and use a stylus. You can probably maybe try and find your comfort zone outside when you're away sketching. And also I think one of the greatest things that they've integrated recently is the streaming capability. So a lot of the guys now can stream to sites like Twitch and YouTube and stuff and Facebook through the app, which has been a great thing as well. And obviously their canvas size as well, because they go up to 4K now and beyond. So yeah, professional level work. There's a guy actually, Nikolai Lockerstein, who is based out in towards Russia, Romania, but he has basically built his entire career off the app and does all his concepting on it. So, and this was actually before the iPad Pro and the Pencil came out. So, God only knows what kind of Christmas holiday it was for him when that finally was released. So, guys, check out Procreate. If any of you are regular listeners or have listened to the last episode, you'll know that we tend to give away a code every month, or every kind of episode. So if you guys want to like, comment, and subscribe on the episode on YouTube, if you listen through iTunes or SoundCloud or Spotify, if you want to go through the YouTube side of things for Digital Artcast and like, comment, subscribe, we'll be picking one guy at random, or one girl at random, to get a free code for Procreate to be used. So thanks again to Procreate, and yeah, check it out on the App Store. Thanks, guys. So, Max, we've talked a lot about the kind of beginnings you had in the industry, things you've worked on, and kind of your future plans. You're going into game development now, obviously, because you kind of love games, but I mean, do you feel that there's a main divide between games, movies, and TV when it comes to the 2D side of it, kind of primarily concept and matte, or do you find that the process is similar across all fields when you work on different IPs?
Well, for the game stuff that I do as a map painter, I'm mostly on the cinematics side. So I think that there's pretty much no divide between film and game cinematics. I'm working with mostly when I'm doing Blur stuff. It's my whole digital domain film team.
Yeah, right.
Who's all at Blur now, and so it's kind of like the same team that I was doing features with. So I don't really see that much of a divide there, but I know like with the in-house or in-game stuff, there's not a whole lot of map painting being used. Usually they use map painters for skyboxes or like far distant backgrounds.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff doesn't really interest me, so I've kind of stayed away from it.
Right. And then, I mean, kind of moving forward into the industry now, I mean, you talked about how map painting can be applied against so many different variations of IPs and movies and games. What would you say would be the best way to build a portfolio now, especially if you're looking at getting into map painting? Where's your best starting point? Would you look, obviously your course, of course, but is there any other resources you would recommend for people to look at getting involved in matte painting specifically?
Yeah, it's hard because matte painting is such a tiny niche, and it's a small community. There's not that many resources out there. I wish I could kind of guide people more.
Yeah.
I would say there's a great book called The Invisible Art.
Okay.
It's out of print now, but if you can find a copy of it, it's absolutely incredible.
Wow.
And that's kind of like the history of matte painting from the beginning till now.
Yeah.
But I mean, other than that, that's one of the reasons why I made this Learn Squared course, is because I felt like there wasn't one course that kind of broke it all down. And so I really tried to create what I would have wanted when I was starting out in the industry.
Yeah. And then with that course as well, I mean, would you say that people should use, I mean, it's difficult to try and word this, but I mean, people should use matte painting as something to enhance skills already attained as a 2D artist, or do you feel like people could stand alone within matte painting to produce work? Or
I think traditional skills are always going to help you. The techniques and the tools that's the easy stuff to learn, but understanding color theory and composition and perspective and all of these different things, that's really where the big gains happen, where what takes you from being someone who knows how to use the tools to being an incredible artist.
Yeah.
So I think all of those resources are incredible. If you want to learn color, Nathan Fox is just the man for that.
Oh yeah.
And perspective, it's Ryan Church is just awesome for that. Composition, like study art history for composition to have that context, or the Hudson River School artists and people like that.
Yeah. And then I could also speak to that as well about I've I daily sit by and learn stuff from Scott Robertson's book, because obviously Scott as well is a god in the industry. He's he's one of the kind of founding fathers of concept stuff, especially for a lot of industrial design guys. I know Feng is especially his entire style is based off Scott's work as well. So yeah, and obviously James Gurney as well. A lot of his stuff for understanding light composition. So yeah, I mean there's a ton of resources out, but I think you've got a point in what you're saying, that matte painting it kind of stands alone. Although, which is crazy to me, because you look back at even, I mean, you take one of my favourite films, obviously Star Wars, and the matte painting stuff they were doing on the set back then in the 70s. It's interesting to see how that technique has evolved, where it's more now digital than it was traditional. Painted on glass and placed in perspective in front of a camera. Do you feel like, I suppose a kind of another loaded question, but do you feel like matte painting still has and will have a valid place going forward in the entertainment industry?
Oh, completely. Yeah. I think matte painting is evolving. More and more matte painting needs to rely on 3D. Mm-hmm. But the ability to paint something to 100% photorealism is a rare skill. And it's not rare because it's impossible to learn. It's rare because very few people will spend the time to learn it. It takes endurance and patience. So I think that's one of the big things with concept artists, and why a lot of the time studios will just try to get a concept artist to just push a painting until it's realistic and call that a matte painting. Yeah. But the truth is most concept artists never really practice the last 10% of a painting.
Yeah.
That's the difference between a matte painter and a concept artist. Is a matte painter's taken a painting to that final level more times, and that's really what they're practicing.
Yeah, I think it's the tale as old as time when it comes to concept art, especially since I've tried to wander the industry for 5 years, but the last 10% is the thing that separates people from people who work and people who don't. It's always that last bit that the painting really comes in itself. It's really that last 10% where the painting comes alive. You know what I mean? So I think the guys who have the eye to push it that extra 10% are the guys that are the people who your studios look for, to be able to produce that level almost of work. And I mean, do you see it more in like you said, the kind of difference between matte painters and conceptors? Do you think matte painters and concept artists have their own kind of individual fields, or do you think there's an overlap between the two?
Yeah, there's definitely an overlap for sure. I do a lot of concept art as well.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of concept artists who were matte painters or do matte paintings as well. I think there's definitely an overlap, but it is two different roles.
Yeah.
A concept artist needs to practice coming up with ideas often. It's all about that first 10%.
Yeah.
And get as many hours into that first 10% as possible. And the matte painters are all about that last 10%.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely overlap of people who have experienced and done a lot of both ends of that spectrum, so they can jump back and forth.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Well, okay, just kind of final things to say. Max, is where can people find your work? Is there anything else you want to talk about? Obviously, Learn Squared is something you're kind of pushing just now, because that's on the horizon. So yeah, just give us your fill. What's happening in your world?
Sure. Yeah. You can find my work at maxburman.com or on the social medias, but I'm pretty horrible at those. Trying to get better. If you watch Learn Squared, I'm going to be doing live streams with them and more stuff on the horizon with them. So, if you want to learn more about matte painting, that's what I'm using as the vehicle to teach. That's me.
Grand, fantastic. Just finally, just to thank you again, Max, for coming on and speaking to me. It's been an absolute honor having you on.
It was a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much, and I'm stoked to see you at Axis and doing great work and seeing the Artcast, the digital Artcast, continue to grow.
Oh, thanks, Max. That's really nice of you. So it's been great. And again, guys, remember to like and comment on the video for a chance to win a Procreate code. Thanks again to Procreate for sponsoring the podcast. And check out Max's work, and of course check out Learn Squared as well. Chi and Ash are doing great things over there. And we'll just catch you on the next episode. See you later, guys. Bye.